Hey everybody, it's me, Greg Miller, and I wanted to let you know Comic-Con is coming up and Kinda Funny is going to be there. So if you're at San Diego, we have a bunch of stuff you can come do with us, and you don't even have to have a Comic-Con badge. On Thursday, we're going to Polite Provisions. We're doing a meet and greet there. 5 p.m. You don't need a Comic-Con badge. You do need to be 21. Don't blame me. Those are the drinking laws in the United States of America. Friday, we're doing the GameOverGreggy show at Petco Park as part of Geek and Sundry Studio Stage. No Comic-Con badges required. We're doing that at 3 p.m. And then I'm moderating a whole bunch of Comic-Con panels if you do have a Comic-Con badge, so come hang out with me in the convention center. All the details are up on kindafunny.com/news, so head over there for the full rundown.
What's up, everyone?
Everybody.
I'm sorry, what's up, everybody?
Thank you.
I like how out of all the years, Colin has never, ever adopted that. Because he's got the greetings and salutations.
Yeah.
And I like that about him. I think I should have my own thing.
What are you going to do?
Huzzah!
Huzzah!
Tis I, Scarpino.
Yarr! Yarr! And then you do a monocle.
Yarr!
That's an interesting choice. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the GameOverGreggy show. I'm one of your hosts, Greg Miller, alongside the producer/seducer, Nick Scarpino.
Yarr!
You having trouble producing a mic cover there?
Well, you got me all worried about my mic because it was like turned around for the last time we did this, halfway through. So now I'm just double checking to make sure everyone can hear my sweet, sweet vocal musings.
Smart moves.
Yeah.
Over here, the pride of Long Island, Colin Moriarty.
It's good to be here with you today.
It's good to be here with you today. And over there, in a Shark Finnegan shirt, the pure one, Tim Gettys.
Let Tim host.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Everybody's happy?
Well,
I'm fine. I'm actually feeling pretty good.
Yeah?
I feel great.
Good. I'm exhausted. I have no reason to be so tired.
Well, you do, because you got 243 reasons.
Oh, that's right.
Plus some AR challenges.
I'm just starting
to
the
be
AR
exhausted.
challenges. Don't
Did you
get ahead of yourself.
you found all the Riddler trophies?
All the Riddler trophies are done in Batman Arkham Knight. We've moved on to the AR challenges now.
But do you
Proud
like
of
a
you,
bronze
Greg.
trophy for that?
I don't even know if it popped a trophy. I don't even know. I'm so focused on the platinum, Colin. I have no idea what's happening
The
around it.
Arkham Knight's trophy list is fucking nonsense.
Whack.
It's as a scholar of PlayStation trophies.
Yeah, you are.
There's too many of them. I'm getting trophies for no reason in that game. It's like, oh, I just talked to this guy. Here's a trophy. And it's like, why are there so many bronzes? Because when there are so many bronzes, then there's fewer room for the golds and the silvers.
Of course.
There's an enormous amount of trophies in that game.
Yeah.
Because that's why I was surprised when you're like, I only have 30% of the trophies. I'm like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
But I've been playing. I have, I think, 18 trophies, and it's only like 21% or something like that. I'm like, all right.
Last night I was driving the Batmobile around when I was running up these final Riddler trophies, slid off of a overpass, fell down on 2 wheels, and a trophy popped. I was like, I have no idea what the fuck just happened. No idea what. Maybe that was the drifting one. I'm not even sure.
It's better than PS3 though. Remember when trophies would pop on PS3 though? It would sometimes take like a half.
You
a minute.
couldn't load it up. Well, see that's.
But I like that because
Oh.
sometimes trophies like you didn't know they were happening. Like there was 2 things with PS3 because the trophies would have to. They were loading on a separate thing, so it would take time for them to pop.
Yeah.
There were 2 things with that. A, like the nervousness of you knew you did something, and it's like, is it going to happen? Is it going to work? Because some trophies wouldn't, and it would take like forever sometimes for a trophy to pop. And you'd be like, what the fuck? And then the other thing was like the trophy would randomly pop, and you're like, I don't know what the hell just happened.
Yeah.
And it might have been something I did like a minute ago.
I've been having
Yeah.
I've been having PSN problems out there lately, and it's both a Wi-Fi issue and then this other thing, and then maybe just Arkham Knight being Arkham Knight 2, where like it'll pop and I'll hit the thing, and it wouldn't. First time it happened, it popped the trophy that was the I think it was the glide 20 meters without touching the ground, but within 20 yards of the ground or some shit like that. 400 meters, 20 yards of the ground, and so I'm like, okay, cool. And then it popped, and I was like, cool. I want to make sure that's the one. I clicked the button and nothing happened. I clicked the button, nothing happened. Click, nothing happened. And I mean, I'm clicking it to see it popping in trophies, but now it's not even going to XMB or to the home screen or anything. It's just going. I'm like, well, that's not normal. That's not right at all. That's not good. That is very, very bad. And so then it's going, and I landed, and I'm like, all right, cool. And I held it, and it finally popped out to the new XMB. I went over to trophies, go into it. It did like syncing with PSN, and it was 0%, and it was minutes at 0%. I was like, oh no. And I went in, and it wasn't loading icons, and then it was showing the one that I just popped is not being done.
Arkham Knight is whacking out PS4s, man. I'm telling you, 'cause
Yeah.
it catastrophically crashed my PS4s. We talked about it on Colin
Really?
Live today. Yeah.
Now, the thing about that is
like worse than any game's ever crashed my PS4.
The bat logo you're talking about that pops up in the corner, usually, and this is from Arkham City and Arkham Asylum before, that would be done when it was loading something that still hadn't loaded. You know what I mean? Because like they hide loading behind opening doors and stuff like that, but sometimes it would fuck up. And like, but I had the exact same thing happen to me where I'm just gliding through the city and then freeze. bat spinning logo, and then hard lock.
Yeah, it probably didn't.
I
It wasn't
get
able
that
to.
at all.
It wasn't
You
able to
haven't really played
stream
the game.
That's crazy. No, that's crazy. Because that was actually one of my pros for the game was that I was like, I never noticed loading. With of course, the exception of
these are one-off situations. It's
That's
not like
true.
it's the end of the world.
Unless
you're a PC player.
If that Batman logo, if that's the case, then the game was unable to stream. What was next? That probably why it's crashed. Because my PS4 crashed, and then like I couldn't even shut it off with the button. Like usually when you can hold it down with the button, and
you
like
got the internet
I had to
power.
remove the plug from the back of the PS4.
Damn.
Which is like really bad. And then I plugged it back in, and it would not turn on for like 5 minutes.
That's terrifying.
And I was like,
right?
oh no, I was
God.
like, my launch PS4 is dead. Fuck.
I've been noticing mine sounding more and more like a jet.
Yeah,
so I've
mine-
been saving. I finish a game, I jump out, I immediately upload to the cloud, or
Yeah,
if the cloud isn't working, which happens all the fucking time, onto a USB.
Yeah, Witcher 3 sounds like a SpaceX hangar. It's like it's incredibly loud when I'm playing that game, and it's not even running a disc.
Terrifying.
Doesn't make any sense.
If you didn't know, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Game Over Greggy show. Each and every week, 4, sometimes 5 best friends gather on this table, each bringing a random topic of discussion for your amusement. If you like that, you can get the whole show by tossing us a few bucks early over on patreon.com/kindafunny. But if you don't want to give us any money, no big deal. Head over to youtube.com/kindafunny, where we break it up topic by topic and post it day by day until the entire thing goes up the following Friday as one big video and one big MP3. Colin,
Yes.
you're up first.
I was just thinking before I even say what the topic was that, someone in the comments of the first episode is always like, topic starts at this time,
Yeah.
And now we're going to get another one of those because we just went on a.
Well, that's how the
an
show
8-minute
works.
Yeah. No, I agree. I was always
fuck off.
Yeah.
Phil DeFranco's got plenty of shows for you to watch.
I was always confused by that mentality because I was like, isn't that what makes Game Over Greggy's show fun?
You'd think so.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's weird
like
to
you
me
really
that
wanna get into
people
the heart
are
of the
like-
matter.
Like, yeah, let's actually, we want to hear their thoughts on whatever.
But
the
maybe
topic
it's
is.
just a best friend throwing up the flare so that when we do get the random person who clicks for no reason to go hear what we're about to talk about, they don't come into the gay marriage topic
It's not.
and hear about Batman Arkham Knight for a while and Batmobile trophies.
It's not. It's a complainer complaining.
It's a whiner being a whiner.
Haters are gonna hate.
Yeah.
And you know what, Greg? If they hate, let them hate and watch the money pile up.
Okay.
50.
With the bottle of bub.
Yeah, there you go.
My show, my wrong.
But I thought it was funny to have that aside because it even adds more time until I get to the topic. So now, but now we're actually gonna talk about the topic. So I'm batting. I hit a home run last week with the Confederate. That's enough, Greg. That's enough. Thank you. That's enough. I hit a home run last week with the Confederate flag topic, and so we thought we would go again. And what was so interesting last week is that 2 significant issues came across or came out of the Supreme Court. I mean, they render a lot of decisions at the same time. No one cares about any of those.
How often is the Supreme Court decision coming around?
Pretty often, but they'll have days where they release like 15 or 20,
Okay.
and then they go away for a little while. And
Like a PSN update.
Exactly. And it's funny, like AP has these things where it's like their faces, like the 9 Supreme Court justice faces, like colored in or grayed out for how they voted, and it's always like Ann Scalia is like always no on everything because he's a nut job.
Yeah, he's taken a lot of crap for the last week. A lot of shit.
Yeah, he's an interesting person. He's a strict constructionist, as they call him. In other words, he doesn't believe the Constitution is a living document. But we talked about the Confederate flag, which is not really a constitutional issue as much as it's just a issue of good taste. But we did have a Supreme Court decision about gay marriage that I wanted to talk about. Gay marriage has been legalized in the United States. The states have been voting on it. The states have usually been voting it down. But states vote up things like civil unions and stuff like that, but they don't believe, in a lot of states don't believe in gay marriage. But the Supreme Court said that according to the 14th Amendment, which is one of the Civil War amendments, that it is, unconstitutional to deny a gay person the right to marry another gay person. So I was curious about what your guys' thoughts about this were, and we're all pretty much, I think, unanimously pro-gay marriage, so I think we know what that's going to be. But my question to you, moreover than that, is what do you think the next civil rights movement will be? Because, obviously there's still a gay rights movement. Gay people are still disrespected in many different ways, but it seems like the tide is turning now. This is a very symbolic thing for the gay rights movement. I was even reading a piece, and I don't know if it was from Andrew Sullivan or someone where he was writing like there's a little bit of remorse in the gay community right now because they don't feel one of the things that rallied them for so many decades as a community and kind of uplifting each other was how they were different and how they had a fight to fight, and now they're having fewer and fewer fights, and now they're just becoming more and more normal and ingrained in society, and there's a little bit of remorse about that, about how like maybe there's less that differentiates.
Something that was such a point of pride and special is a little lessened now. I can appreciate that.
It was fighting against the machine, being like, we want these rights, and then the machine's finally like, okay, and like, and it's like, okay, now what? Now you live. So I was curious how you guys felt about the decision and the reaction to the decision, and then what you think the next fight is, because I have something very specific in my mind, and I think the next civil rights fight is going to be. But I'm curious what you guys think. So,
I'm thrilled. It spoke to. I thought we have a conversation with Colin in the books. That's the right and wrong side of history, and the gay marriage or whatever. Was happy to see that come around and people be on the right side of history on this one. But I was more excited by the reaction, which on Twitter was universally happy. super super happy.
Well, and maybe in our circle, not.
Sure, but I'm talking about our circle.
The internet, man. I think that's a big thing, though. It's like I was surprised with how little negativity I saw.
Yeah.
Without searching for it, and I'm sure it's out there, and
of course it's out there. Yeah, I've seen those articles and stuff.
of people, but there was none of that the hatred and stuff in front of me, and I think that's a good sign, because in past experiences it has been.
Yeah,
I definitely whenever this stuff came up, it was always there always was people that disagreed in ways that I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense to me. I can't comprehend you being thinking this way. What is Kevin doing right now?
I don't know. I'm actually less fascinated by what Kevin's doing and more fascinated by watching Colin watch what Kevin's doing. Because Colin gets this look on his face where he's like, he's got this internal bet going in his head.
This is the one.
This was the day I put $50 on Kevin falling through the fucking window and cutting open his jugular.
Yeah, there's just so much movement. So much movement with everything he does.
You have a grace to you in the way you move. And
you have the moves like Jagger,
You do. Where it is fascinating that you haven't destroyed the world around you already.
Let's go back to the topic.
When we put up the conversation with Colin, right and wrong side of history and stuff, I remember more people wanting not to fight it, but to talk the other side to me, kind of thing. And when this happened, there was only one commenter on my Twitter who, when I was talking about it, popped up and was like, this still isn't that good of an idea, da, da, da. And then I started commenting to that person, and then within 45 minutes he had deleted his Twitter account because everyone was coming to him, and he was like, I've never been more bullied than before. And people were like, you're not being bullied, you presented an argument we don't agree with, and we're responding to it respectfully. And I'm sure there were people who were bullying him or whatever, but the majority of comments I was seeing were because it was a guy, he was basically saying this doesn't matter, this is fine, but they still can't be parents. They still shouldn't be able to adopt children or whatever kind of thing. Mother and father
first of
love
all,
is what's
a single
needed.
person can adopt a child, so that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That argument holds no water. I don't know. I'm on the same side too, where I woke up and I'm usually very oblivious to big news that's happening. You guys very well know, between the three of you, you keep me current. If I didn't have you guys in my life, I'd just be operating in a void where I'd still think it was 1989. But waking up on Twitter that day was phenomenal.
Yeah,
I saw all
happy.
of you guys that already had tweets that were out. Colin, I specifically remember your tweet. It was cool. It was very powerful, and it's very powerful to also see the sort of next generation of people on the internet using social media to promote that positive energy, which I think is honestly it's got to be one of the most powerful tools out there. And you guys talk about, obviously I hope no one, even regardless of your views, ever gets bullied. But when you're talking about social change, there is a fair amount of energy that has to be put into that, right? And there has to be a unity that has to go along with that. It's the social tide, right? It's the social sort of zeitgeist that has to be a collective issue. I think I might be losing myself in all of these, but I think you guys are following me. And seeing that, waking up and seeing that tide and seeing that sort of that unity, really is a very, very powerful thing. And it makes me wonder, is the internet in general or social media that tool that's really going to help accelerate these changes in our lives? Are we going to see more of this, and are they going to come faster, right? Because should this... you're talking about all the great civil rights movements that have happened, the civil rights movement, obviously, that happened in our country, and then also, women's rights and their fight, and now gay and lesbian rights. it's all happening so fast and accelerated, and it makes me very, very proud, and it makes me think that we're doing more right in this country than we are wrong, and in reality we're probably not.
Yeah, but I just think it is a step in the right direction. And I mean, like, when it comes down to it, before it was entirely controlled by media. Now it's entirely, like, media is entirely controlled by social media. Everyone creates media. There's no longer just a media that is this thing that is, you know, different than who you are. Everybody is the media. Everybody is the message. Everybody is doing this themselves. And it was interesting for me to see, because every time these big things happen, you see the armchair activists, you see the people that are, like, don't know what the hell they're talking about, or just whatever, participating just because, like, it's like a fashion statement more than anything. We're just like, oh, everyone's talking about this, I'm gonna say something about it, even though they don't know what they're talking about. And, like, you see them, like, oh, everyone's changing their profile pictures to be whatever it is. But this time
it was rainbow.
this is like putting the rainbow and stuff over that. But it's just like, who gives a shit about if it's real, it's fake, if they know what they're talking about, whatever. They're promoting positivity. They're promoting love. They're promoting something good. Who cares about they don't really know what they're talking about? Because I'm seeing a lot of people argue that. I'm like, come on, guys. But what was special to me is seeing the corporations jump on this. And the argument can be made for there. It's like, oh, well, they're just doing it for public image, and they're just doing it so that people rally behind them. It's like, well, let's stop and appreciate for a second that they are doing something to support gay marriage to gain the public's, like, thumbs up. That's fucking awesome. There's definitely been a swing of the pendulum of the views on that, because even just a few years ago, you wouldn't see
they would have stayed
every single corporate logo on Twitter and on everything being a freaking rainbow.
Well, it's fascinating too, and as far as these big tech companies are concerned, how much power they have in influencing and setting policy. And I'm trying to remember the example that happened a few months back. It was what state went out and spoke out vehemently against gay marriage. I forget which one it was.
A lot of them.
And I forget. I'll have to. Kevin, maybe you can look this up. But it was one of those where, and I think it was like Google and Oracle and all the big tech companies were like, we're not operating in your state anymore. And they were like, shit.
No one can search Google from your state.
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't Google specifically, but I think
I know what you're talking about.
Do you know that one of the governors came out and said, we don't support gay marriage, and they were like, you know what, then we don't support you anymore. And like he turned around very, very quickly, because it's just not socially acceptable anymore. You really can't think that way anymore, because it's becoming more and more apparent that is a kind of a bigoted and prejudiced perspective on life. Like,
and it's
you are
interesting
really
Greg said the bully thing, because it's just like that guy felt like he was being bullied, and it's like, that's not cool. You shouldn't bully anybody for anything, even if their opinions are, you know, mean. But it's like, that's cool. That's you are now the asshole. It's no longer you are correct for this, or that they are the other people in the wrong. It's like they're in the minority.
Yeah.
At least from the socially accepted
in that circle,
view.
sure.
Yeah, I think that, you know, this is such a complicated, multifaceted issue, because I've been in pro-gay marriage for a very long time, and a lot of people think that doesn't sync up with my conservative views. But one of the things I tweeted that got retweeted about 1,000 times actually was that this is actually a conservative victory, and that our politics is so backwards in the United States that the party that based itself on classical liberalism, which is like a live and let live kind of, you know, Jeffersonian kind of outlook on life, doesn't realize that this is a victory for them. That we have one party that wants the government involved in everything, and one party that doesn't want the government involved in anything unless it's something that the Bible tells them is wrong. And it's just an inconsistent worldview. That's why I'm pro-choice. That's why I'm pro-gay marriage. It's because it's the right of the individual. It's sacred. It's an inalienable right. It's a sacred right. And some people are like, well, this might lead to polygamy and stuff like that. You know, like, what's next? Polygamy or something? I'm like, sure, why not?
Yeah, why not? Who cares?
Like, I don't care. If consensual adults want to get married in a fivesome, then whatever. I really don't give a fuck. You know,
having been married for 3 years, that's a terrible idea. Yeah. But more power to you if you want to do that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
If I had more than one wife, I would leave the house. I would just lock myself in a room, but like, leave me alone, and rock back and forth.
Now, here's the complicated thing, and it's something I want to bring up, because I do like to bring up the opposing argument. There's a lot of bigots out there. There's no doubt about it, right? There are people out there that have that I feel like don't know, or maybe aren't necessarily being bigoted, but do have issues with it on a basis of religion or something like that, and I respect that. You know what I mean? I don't think it's a consistent view, because the Bible does say a lot of shit that we don't accept anymore, but for some reason everyone has latched on to this particular thing, ignoring the fact that the Old Testament talks about things like, I don't know, slavery and murder and all these kinds of things. But we ignore all of that. But yeah, okay, all right. So, but nonetheless, I respect that is a worldview some people have. That is not what people don't seem to understand, or some people that are really up in arms about it don't seem to understand, is that the Supreme Court didn't say like 2 gay people can now walk into the Catholic Church and get married. That's not what it says. It says that they can be married by the state.
It says the state will legally recognize that now.
Exactly. And
by the way, it was already legal in 16 states?
It depends on if you're talking about civil unions or marriages. But I'm going to get to this issue in a minute, because it's an issue that I think presses to the heart of the matter of like why this is a big deal in a grander way. We in a society have crossed religion and civics to an extent that the founders should be very uncomfortable with. And I do agree that it would be a problem constitutionally to walk into to force a church to marry a gay couple if they don't want to. I believe that's wrong.
Yeah.
You know, because I do respect the religious conscience of certain people, but you would need to now be able to walk into a state house or a state sanctioned place and be able to get married. And I think that that's great, because even though the libertarian philosophy dictates that like government shouldn't be involved in marriage, the fact of the matter is the government is very involved in marriage, and you can't turn back that clock. There are tax ramifications, there are estate planning ramifications, there's spousal privilege, there's all sorts of shit that gay people cannot enjoy even if they've been together 10, 20, 30 years, and it's not fucking acceptable. You know what I mean? Like we can't have different rights for different groups of people. It's just not right. And to your point, a lot of states, when states began voting popular vote for gay marriage, voted it down. And this is why you cannot vote on minority rights. This was something that Jefferson and Adams warned us about in the 18th century. You cannot. It's called the tyranny of the majority. The majority cannot vote on the minority. You can go to certain states and ask the electorate crazy shit, and they're going to vote it up or down. You know what I mean? I'm sure that there's a state in the union that you can go to over and over and over again and say it's going to say no to gay marriage over and over again. Multiple states. Mm-hmm. And multiple states have done that. Many states have done that. That doesn't make it right. There's no wisdom in tyrannical majority voting. You know what I mean? That's why you don't vote on rights. That's why the majority doesn't rule for everything.
Right.
Because the minority cannot protect itself. And that's why we should have never been voting on these issues to begin with. And that's why I feel like the Supreme Court had to get involved. And it reminds me a great deal of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where the argument, like Goldwater's argument against it, was not necessarily that he was a bigot. I don't know if he was or not. I don't know the man. A lot of their arguments were like, well, we can't have the Civil Rights Act because we can't tell private companies what to do. If they want to refuse the service to someone, then they should be based on whatever. Then that's probably their right. The argument from there was that like bigoted institutions would eventually go out of business. And my argument to that is sometimes you have to do things that are maybe, I don't want to say extra constitutional, but wiggle their way into the Constitution in a different way because it's the fucking right thing to do. And the Civil Rights Act was the right thing to do. There was no time to waste. There was no time to let the system figure it out. People are dying.
Right.
You know? And with gay marriage, it's the same thing. It might be a loose interpretation of the 14th Amendment. It might ignore the 10th Amendment a bit, but it's the right thing to do. Yeah. And sometimes that's an important thing to keep in mind.
It's dangerous though, because it doesn't become the right thing to do until it becomes almost an overwhelming majority of people telling the government that is the right thing to do, right? So where does that line get drawn? Is like 10 years ago, it was still the right thing to do. 20 years ago, it was the right thing to do. What changed now that it finally became caught up as, like, where did that pendulum swing from, okay, this is not going to happen, to all of a sudden, almost seemingly overnight, boom, it's legal.
Popular opinion, dude.
Yeah, it's mainstream, right? It went mainstream. Once people
yeah.
understand what's happening and they know gay people and they see positive gay people being represented on TV and stuff. Mm-hmm. Once it's not a in the closet issue, once it's not these people gave us HIV, then it's a different story, right? It all comes down to exposure.
Yeah, and what's so funny about that is that, you know, I've talked about this I think a little bit in the past, that the social media and kind of reality television era, so like the last 15 years, not so much for social media but more for reality television, and the internet really has taken social issues and pushed them to the left, with the exception of one. Pro-choice is actually more popular, or pro-life rather, has actually become more popular the last 20 years. But other than that, everything else is swinging to the left, and it's because what Greg is saying, like there's just exposure to things you didn't know existed or didn't anticipate or didn't understand. And the gay marriage issue specifically, and public opinion polls on gay marriage swung radically in the last 10 years, like radically.
Yeah, they have.
Like maybe to the extent of like 25 or 30 points, which is insane. That's fucking insane. So something that doesn't happen with anything. So something, usually politics and a movement is very glacial. So I do think it had a little bit of activism in the court, and that's not always the appropriate thing, but that's the right thing to do. But I applaud this court for passing this, and I appreciate the arguments against the 10th Amendment, and I appreciate the arguments, the religious conscience arguments. I think that the 10th Amendment wasn't written to ensure that if the rights weren't enumerated in the Constitution, that they're always to the rights of the state necessarily when it comes to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is not, of course, in the Constitution, but something that we live by in this country. And I think it's important to recognize that gay people were discriminated against and are still discriminated against, and we need to right the wrong, just like the way we need to right the wrong with racism and sexism. We need to right the wrong here. It's the right thing to do, and it is a victory for the individual. It is a victory. It doesn't affect your marriage. It doesn't affect your church. It doesn't affect fucking anything.
I know,
and
that's the thing that kills me so much about it. Is it's like it would be, it's not like the argument for immigration, right? Where you're like, well, they're coming over, like immigrants are coming to the country and they're using resources, and that's something you have to consider, right? Or they're taking jobs, right? You always say that they're taking jobs, especially in California where you have, Mexican immigrants coming in and quote unquote taking jobs. I don't have any statistics. I'm not going to speak to that, right? That has an added layer. What is the downside to letting more people get married other than what? There's going to be more money put into the system, and they have, I guess, some tax breaks, but like it doesn't affect my marriage at all. If you two, let's be honest, when you two decide to finally tie the knot,
right?
Well, I announced it that morning.
Yeah, I know. So when that happens, it really won't affect me one way or the other. There's no rights that are going to be taken away from me so that you guys can enjoy that right and that happiness and that privilege. So it's almost one of those things where you're like, this is just a point of pride or ego or some sort of random deep-seated hatred or fear or prejudice that doesn't make any sense when you actually start thinking logically about it.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't make sense.
I have a question for you though, Colin. Do you think that you see a lot of right-wing candidates that are coming in, they're getting in office, and they always have to answer the question of this, or they either have to skate around the issue of gay marriage, or they have to answer, and you can see them cringing in the back of their brain because they don't actually believe the answer half the time. Does this take that off the table now?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big, really popular arguments right now is that they will be asked about it with an immediacy, but it's not a question anymore.
It's legal.
Any
now they can answer it's legal.
Yeah, well, and that's, I think,
can't change that.
We need to respect our courts and what they've said.
Yeah, I think that's Jeb Bush's answer was basically like, it's just the courts have spoken. Like we the beauty of the American system is that we have, and the beauty of our republic, and we are not a democracy, which is another reason why we don't directly vote on issues like this, is that we have beautiful, almost the most elegant separation of powers that ultimately allows the court to settle these issues. A court that there are Reagan nominees in the court still. It's all sorts of people that are
scary.
I love it. I love that the people are put into the court and they cannot be removed.
Has to.
And that's the way it is because they have to have no political pressure put on them at all to make decisions, and that is the beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
They can be removed if they're impeached, but that they can't be impeached for their opinion. They can be impeached if they're acting, with impropriety.
Yeah.
But I just feel like it's the right thing to do. There comes ultimate moments where, and I saw a John Oliver video about this that I thought was really pressing about transgender rights, which I'm going to get to in a minute because I think that is the next civil rights movement in this country, is that there's such obviousness about what Greg was talking about before with the right side of history. And you shouldn't necessarily believe in anything because you are going to be on the wrong side of history or the right side of history. You should believe maybe what you're going to believe, but know that if you are against this, you are on the wrong side of history. And I thought it was a powerful argument to be like, it's predictable. We know how this ends. This happens over and over and over and over again, and resistance lessens until the rights are garnered to a new group of people. So I applaud, the gay community in the United States for this because I think this is a big step forward for them. I think it's a big step forward for liberty. I think it's a big step forward for individual rights and the values of the individual and the individual to make their choices. And I also think that if it leads to, the whole polygamy argument and all these fucking random arguments, like, ultimately, it's none of the government's business what people are doing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. As long as they're not hurting anyone. And this is the antithesis of hurting someone. This is loving someone. Is their divorce rate going to be just as high as straight people? Absolutely. Are lawyers 100%. Going to reap the benefits in 5, 10, 15, 20 years from the influx of gay marriages that are going to be happening now, just like straight marriages? Absolutely. There's all sorts of unintended consequences, but that's just the market working. It doesn't mean that you have to pull back on rights.
Yeah, that's not an argument for not giving people the right to do
exactly.
it.
It's all very silly. Now, to the original question I asked, like, what do I think the next Civil Rights Act will be a movement? I think it's absolutely going to be transgendered people, and this is a group of people that I feel very badly for because this is still a question. This is still something that is misunderstood and not understood. This is something that some people throw around things like mental illness and all these kinds of things. And I think it's wrong. And here's what I have to say about this. there used to be a question of, is homosexuality, for instance, a choice, or is it something that is born in you?
with, right?
And I think it's pretty obvious that you're born with it. Yeah. But our argument used to be, if it's a choice, what does it matter? You know what I mean? Let's say it was a choice. Who cares? It doesn't change the fact that is their right to do that. And so when people bring up this new issue with transgendered people about, well, is it their choice? Do they choose to be a man or a woman? Is it something that's born into them? Is there a chemical imbalance, whatever it might be? And I'm like, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day.
Do you?
Exactly.
I think that the argument for that was, if it was a choice, then it can be, it can be fixed, or quote unquote.
I know that,
which
but there's also a thing of like, if it's a choice, it's the same thing with gay marriage or just homosexuality generally. If it's a choice, then it's not something that necessarily needs to be accepted by society. And to me, that is wrong. To me, it's about saying, like, if a man is born a man but he feels like a woman and he wants to be a woman, and so she is a woman. And I struggle sometimes with the he, the he or the she. Or I confuse that sometimes, never intentionally.
But I think that, again, that's the education thing, and that's what Greg was saying, is that now, like, the gay thing is such a mainstream. Like, everybody knows how to deal with that, and everybody has dealt with it. Like,
well, it's because I mean, to Colin's point, like, people who are transgendered, that is not as in the mainstream as being gay.
Well, that's,
being
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So to me, it feels like we're almost 30 years ago with that.
Yeah.
Where we were with homosexuality in the 80s, we are with transgendered people now. And it sucks, because the answer to this is it's going to take another 20 years. I mean, even in the workplace, like, we've worked with transgender people. We worked with them at IGN. We worked with I've worked with them all around. It's not. They're still looked at as sort of, I don't want to even throw a term out, because I don't want to reinforce that negative stereotype. But it's not something that you see every day, because people are too goddamn afraid to come out. Like, look at what just happened. Finally, someone had the chutzpah to come out and be like, this is who I've been all of my life, through 3 marriages, 4 kids, all this stuff. I am a woman, and that was a phenomenal thing that Caitlyn Jenner did for transgender people. Like, having just the sheer willpower to do that must have been terrifying for Caitlyn Jenner. Coming out, doing that, living like that now, and actually, of course, now there's an show about her, which, I'll be honest, I'll probably watch, because I'm fascinated to see what her life's going to be like, right?
About,
yeah,
the fact
this is what's necessary.
And that's true. And to more power to E. God bless him. Like, most of the time, I don't look at E as anything that gives society anything worthwhile. But on this specific instance, like, this is awesome, and this is what needs to happen.
That's the thing, and like, I think that's what we were talking about earlier with the mainstream and all these people. Like, all the corporations are only doing it kind of like as a fashion statement to say, hey, look, I'm cool. But it's like, we can't look at it for that. Who gives a shit about that? It's the fact that they're putting out this positivity. Like, another thing is, I've seen so many jokes, and a lot of people have actually tweeted at me being like, oh man, thanks to Macklemore, like, now the gays are good, like, everything's fine. And it's just like, don't hate on Macklemore for this. Like, who gives a shit? Like, people will always bring up the argument of like, oh, it's a white rapper that's not gay using all of this to make a song, just whatever. And it's like, who cares? He put out something positive.
Well, first of all, he put out something genuine as well. It's not like he was just randomly throwing out any sort of that messaging because he's like, this is going to sell records.
I know. People might argue the opposite of that, though.
I'm sure there was a certain portion of him or his team or his thought process that was like, how do I make this as popular as possible? Because that's what we all do. But to a certain degree, like, guess what? Every sort of messaging, anytime you want to affect any sort of change, there is a fair amount of marketing that has to happen in that, right? And there have been a lot of thought leaders that have promoted that sort of change over the last 30 years, who have worked really, really hard and put their safety and their family's safety on the line to go out on a limb and say, this is how you should believe, because this is the right thing to do. But they're, especially in the mainstream media, especially Hollywood is very much for pro gay rights, because there are a lot of homosexuals in Hollywood, and the fact of the matter is, like, that is a huge marketing vehicle to promote that positive change. That's what has to happen. And now we're starting to see that again, where there's a show on E about a transgendered person, and it is not being negatively received.
Well, see, that's what I was saying. Awesome. It's like the argument to be made there is like, they're only doing that because it's controversial, and it's like they're marketing that. It's like,
well, it is.
Don't worry about that. Like, this is a good thing. You know what I mean? Like, look at that for the positivity.
The danger with that is, of course, when they also market Kim Kardashian, and a lot of people would look at her and be like, okay, well, we're oversaturated with this. We don't necessarily need her that whatever message, whatever she represents, do we need more of that in this culture?
Exactly, but whatever. I mean,
but they'll speak to different audiences.
That's true.
Different things.
I'm not saying Kim Kardashian's wrong. I think she's she is what she is. She's entertainment.
I believe you just said Kim Kardashian is the biggest threat to transgender acceptance.
No, that would be.
I'm just telling you what I heard.
Don't even joke about that because her father just became Caitlyn Jenner. Like
I know.
Yeah.
I was going to say
she's been very, very accepting.
I was going to say that
no one really thinks you just said that.
I was going to say that she was. I watched the whole thing of like the whole special of him kind of coming to terms with this and talking to his kids and all this kind of stuff. And she was by far the most supportive of all of them.
Yeah.
And I thought that showed a great deal of character on her part too. A lot of people give her shit, but I think she's still one of the most brilliant businesswomen in the entire United States.
Absolutely is.
And
absolutely.
she's laughing all the way to the bank. So hate away. She's the one who has the last laugh, guaranteed. But there's a few. So I agree with you. Caitlyn Jenner, the Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner thing, I think was a very brave and bold move, and I think that Vanity Fair should also be applauded for that. And I'm sorry.
Just real quick, I think because a point I was trying to make earlier is I feel like that was from the marketing perspective, all that. The "Call Me Caitlyn," I think that alone, that statement is like such a huge step forward for the transgender stuff. Just because it's like I'm not Bruce, I'm Caitlyn. Call me Caitlyn.
Yeah.
And it's like I feel like that is part of the getting it into the mainstream and educating people on how you're supposed to respond. Like earlier, you're saying we're not so sure. Like, is it
I get
he,
confused
is it she,
sometimes
whatever.
because Caitlyn Jenner is a good example of the fact that like, and this is where things get complicated. You assume that because Caitlyn Jenner is a man, was a man, and wants to be and feels a woman and becomes a woman, that he is therefore gay, but he says that he's not.
Nope.
So like then the layers like get deeper and deeper. Like he's always been attracted to women. He just feels like a woman. So like it takes education and learning, and you're gonna make mistakes, and that needs to be acceptable. And to the credit of the people that make mistakes, some people are way too hard on the people that make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because it is a brave new world. Like you don't.
That's the other thing too. Is for the longest time, especially since for 36 years, I've operated under the assumption that there are a set amount of things that I need. Like there are a set amount of variants, right? This is a new one. Like if you're a man, you're either homosexual, heterosexual, or bisexual, right? So generally, you're in that category. But then now there are people out there that maybe don't want to necessarily define themselves by those three categories.
Fuck
and
your
we have to
labels,
be
Nick Scarpino.
okay with that,
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that's the important thing.
There's also a fourth one, but that's whatever Kevin
Asexual.
is. Whatever Kevin does.
Oh, good Lord!
I'm not going to bring it up, Kevin. I just wanted to throw it out there to lighten the mood.
I feel like so I think that again, I feel like it's an issue of it's a delicate issue, and to the people that have a religious issue with it, I respect your religious issue. Understand that we live in a secular society, and your religious issues aren't really important in terms of the way we deal with things in society as a civic society. Mm-hmm. I will be in your corner if the Supreme Court goes the Catholic Church and the Jewish, you can go to synagogue or whatever, and you have to marry gay people, and it's even though it's against your religious doctrine. Frankly, I'll be right in your corner. And I'll say that's totally wrong because that infringes on your religious rights.
Right.
Just as your feeling of thinking that your religious doctrine can affect the rights of a homosexual who might not believe in your religion, who might be an atheist, who might be of a different religion, or who just doesn't give a fuck and just wants to get married. They're not interested in banging your fucking church door down and getting married in your church.
Right.
And if that doesn't happen, and that's not going to happen, then it's a live and let live society. We are a secular society. There is a separation of church and state that is explicit. And so your religious concerns are totally valid. I come from a religious family, but it's not relevant to the argument.
I mean, but that's the problem, though. I mean, you see, like, so much of our government is tied in with religion, and so to a point that it's confusing. It really is, because especially if you're growing up as you're a teenager, like how would you would see senators or people running for president talking about God, and you would assume that those two are intrinsically tied together, and they are not, and they should not be, but they kind of are. Right. That's where that comes in. The other problem is, and the other question is, a lot of gay people are Catholic. Like,
yeah, no shit, man.
So what do you do there? In that regard, you can't. The way I look at it is, you can't force a corporation to provide a service that they don't want to have to provide, right? I mean, I guess you.
Well, this is the thing. This is where things get muddy, and I respect that this is going to be a bit of a mess for some companies because the Civil Rights Act of 1964 says you can't do that. So. It was the whole like lunch counter argument and all that kind of thing. Black people sitting at the lunch counter at Howard Johnson's or whatever to get served, and they wouldn't be served, and they were removed, and all these kinds of things. So,
but maybe that's good. Maybe that social pressure will force the Catholic Church specifically to bend a little bit to it, right? I mean, we've already seen it. Everyone always talks about how this Pope is a little bit more liberal than everyone else. Maybe that is the next step where they do start beating down the doors and saying, why can't we get married under God? If we can get married in the state, how come our God is not the same as your God? We believe the same that you do. We just have this one little minor.
Yeah, this is coming from a backwards institution that doesn't even let women be priests. But I digress.
And I was going to say that's a fight that drove me away from the Catholic Church. That it has been being fought for more than my entire lifetime, and there's been no movement. Maybe new Pope changes that, but if new Pope can change that and change this, then he's not new Pope. He's super Pope.
He's not ultimately not going to change anything. They can't even get married, which is like ridiculous. Jesus was married. I hate to tell you. So I know the Bible doesn't say that.
They gloss over that conveniently, Colin.
Well, they leave out a few years.
The Dogma covered it all.
But
go watch the documentary Dogma.
I was also reading that he had a brother as well, but I don't know if that's what the historicity of that is. So I appreciate that there's all sorts of nuance, right? And I think that
what was his brother's name?
Jim Christ.
Jim Christ.
Hi,
I'm Jim Christ. Yes, I am relation to Jesus.
So I appreciate that there's a lot of meat on the bone, right? There's a lot of things to consider that, because I really do believe in religious freedom as well, and we have to respect a person's religious freedom. But in the civic sphere, that doesn't take precedence over the inalienable rights of the individual, and so that's why I think that this is a victory. And you can have it both ways. I really do believe that. That if the church doesn't want to marry and whoever they want to marry that's their right as a religious institution,
a private club.
Exactly, but that's not what the question is.
But as well, though, I mean, like if I'm not super religious, they wouldn't marry me either. Like no, I can't go into a Jewish synagogue and get married.
Exactly,
I can't do that.
And I grew up Catholic.
I have friends that have had to convert to Judaism, and it is a process. They're serious about that. They're not screwing around,
dude. I didn't get confirmed, so I can't get married in the church.
Yeah,
and I'm Catholic.
And that's fine.
So I'm an atheist, but I'm culturally Catholic. Like I would get married in church if they would let me, but they're not. So
it's exactly
rules.
Like Kevin.
There's rules.
Kevin can't work here anymore unless he gets me a cup of coffee. It's exactly the same way.
I quit.
He's standing up for himself. This kitten's got claws.
I want to close. I want to close with a couple of thoughts, if I may, to our audience. It's important for you guys to realize and understand that you are welcome here with us, regardless of your sexual orientation, regardless of your gender identity, regardless of any of those things. There's a lot of hate out there, and it's a very uncomfortable place for people that feel different to feel safe and at home somewhere. And you are at home here with us. We don't judge you for the choices you make. We don't judge you for the way you feel, because I don't think it's a choice. I don't understand why so many people still think it's a choice. Why would you choose to be different if you didn't have to be? It makes no sense, and put yourself in peril and put maybe even your life in danger sometimes, or put your happiness or your success or your career in danger. So you're welcome here with us, and there's no room for bigotry at Kind of Funny. And for those of you that are uncomfortable with that or uncomfortable with these decisions or whatever, that's totally fine. We respect that too, but we want to keep the debate and the conversation around this respectful as well. I think the homosexual community in the United States, the gay community, has scored a great victory. I am now ready to fight the cause for the transgender acceptance movement as well, which I think is very important, because it's important for people to be happy and to feel accepted. And that's not an issue of religion, and it's not an issue of constitutionality. It's an issue of humanism, and we can argue about immigration, we can argue about the economy, we can argue about government, but when it comes down to the individual, we are born with inalienable rights, and it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, or if you're a liberal or a conservative or whatever you happen to be, you have the same rights, and we've just affirmed that this week. So congratulations to you, and that's basically what I wanted to talk about today. That's basically it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it doesn't take. Just as a side note, hopefully it doesn't take as long for transgendered. Hopefully we've accelerated.
Now that social media is here, this is a different story.
Yeah.
And Macklemore, get on that.